So a little context before I get into what happened. The three of us went to high school together, but my best friend's husband met her at work. My husband Jacob, 28M, and I, 28F, got married 3 years ago after 2 years of being together. My best friend Nicole, 28F, and I have been friends ever since we were in kindergarten. We've been friends for a really long time and are still going strong. She married Travis a year ago, 30M, after being in a relationship for about 3 years. Jacob wasn't friends with me and Nicole back in high school, but we were acquaintances. Jacob and I only met at the high school reunion we had a couple of years after graduation, and we became friends there. Nicole had to skip that one because she was sick. He asked me out on a couple of dates and we realized we had a lot more in common than we'd thought. That's how we got into a relationship, and we were relatively happy. Our married life was great, too, and we'd even gone out on several double dates with Nicole and Travis. Things were going so well until about a week ago, when my husband and I were having a night in and we'd polished off an entire bottle of wine because we'd had a really busy week and wanted to celebrate. Just for fun, we decided to play that game where we named 5 celebrities who we could hook up with without our partner getting mad at us, and I named 5 celebrities but he was able to name only 4. I was teasing him about it and told him that he needed to name 5 or else I'd win this one. Of course, there was no winning or losing in this game. I was just messing with him, but he thought about it for a while and then blurted out that he'd definitely love to get with Nicole sometime or the other if he knew that I wouldn't get mad. I was shocked and didn't know what to say at the time and tried to laugh it off since he was chuckling as well. But in spite of being drunk as hell, I couldn't find the humor in what he'd said and couldn't just laugh it off. So I asked him if he was being serious and informed him that he could only name celebrities because it's unlikely that we'll ever even get to meet them, and if he names real people, that just makes it weird. He told me that he was serious and even confessed that he'd had a crush on Nicole even when we were in high school. He didn't even think that he should have stopped there and went on to say that he used to think of me as her less attractive sidekick back then. I could just stare at him open-mouthed because whatever he was telling me was just so disrespectful and mean. I guess he'd just forgotten that I was his wife now and continued to talk about how he'd love to have a day out with a woman like Nicole and just how lucky Travis is. I'd had enough that night, so I just left the room without a word and went to the bedroom and went to sleep. I was really upset, but I was also very drunk, so I fell asleep quickly, hoping that I'd forget all of this in the morning. But I didn't forget, and the next morning, I decided to confront Jacob about what he'd said the previous night at breakfast. He seemed pretty unaffected by last night even though I was nursing a terrible hangover. When I asked him if he'd actually meant what he'd said about Nicole last night, he told me that it was all true and didn't even seem sorry about it. He wasn't even embarrassed to admit it and just continued to have his cereal, and I was getting pissed off because this guy was supposed to be my husband, yet he had no shame in admitting that he'd always been more attracted to my best friend. I decided to ask him if he still found Nicole attractive, and without missing a beat, he told me that he did. That was the last straw for me and I lashed out at him over it, but instead of apologizing, he doubled down on what he was saying and told me that I needed to just accept it and move on. He did love me more than her and believed that I was his soulmate, but he still did think that Nicole was objectively more attractive than me, and if it came down to physical attraction then he'd pick her over me any day. And he expected me not to be offended at that, because what's more normal than your husband telling you that if it came down to it, he'd rather sleep with your best friend than you? We got into a really ugly fight and he left for work after telling me that I was being petty and childish. He said that he wasn't going to sugarcoat the truth for me, and if he didn't find me as attractive as Nicole then he wasn't going to say it just to boost my ego and make me feel better about myself. He even tried to gaslight me by saying that if I hadn't wanted an honest answer the other night then I shouldn't have brought up that stupid game at all and I should have just let it be when he wasn't able to name 5 people instead of teasing him about it, as if I was the problem here. I didn't go to work that day and just kept breaking into tears throughout the day. I wanted to talk to someone about this, but ironically, I couldn't talk to the only 2 people I usually share everything with, my husband and my best friend. So I chose not to say anything and tried to pretend that I was fine when Jacob came back home. We didn't speak after the fight and then for the next 2 days because he was convinced that he hadn't done anything wrong and was just being honest here. On the 3rd day, I finally broke down and ended up telling Nicole everything. She'd noticed that my behavior was all off and I sounded perturbed, so for 2 days, she kept asking me if I was alright and was very concerned about me in general. I just couldn't hold it together anymore and told her the truth. She was furious on my behalf and was about to call Jacob up and give him a piece of her mind, but I stopped her. I just didn't know what to do at all, and I definitely didn't want her to confront him just yet because I wasn't ready. But Nicole pushed me to realize that what Jacob had said to me was really messed up and that I needed to teach him a lesson and then leave this marriage because it was very clear that he didn't respect me at all. She was right, of course, but I didn't know what to do to teach him a lesson. It was only when Nicole mentioned how she wished Jacob would have said something like this while Travis was around and it would have been a sight to see because he'd beat up a guy before who tried to catcall Nicole that I realized I could just do exactly that. I asked her if she'd be okay with me arranging a double date with them in the next couple of days and having Jacob bring this up in front of Travis. She agreed readily and we had a good laugh thinking about what had happened to Jacob if he said crap like this on the date. By then, the hurt had dissipated and had been replaced by anger, so I decided to go ahead with this plan of mine and even apologize to Jacob for overreacting, even though I didn't mean a word for it. I just wanted him to say yes to the double date. I made it up to him with his favorite dinner and he actually had the audacity to tell me that he was glad I'd finally come to my senses and he agreed to the date. The plan that Nicole and I had come up with was reckless enough and I also added fuel to the fire by lying to my husband a day before the date by telling him that I'd learned from Nicole that even she'd had a crush on him for the longest time and would love to go out with him someday, so he should probably bring that up on the date. He seemed taken aback and asked if Travis was okay with it and I lied and said that he didn't care because it was just a date and he didn't mind. He seemed very pleased with that and was smiling from ear to ear when I told him that, which lessened my guilt by a lot, to be honest. Yesterday, we finally left for the date in the evening and Nicole and I had picked one of the finest restaurants in the city. We were all dressed up and it was supposed to be a great day for all of us. Nicole and I were excited because finally, Jacob was going to get whacked and we believed that he desperately needed that. So after some small talk and a couple of glasses of wine, I finally brought up the game that we'd been playing the other day as a way to steer the conversation where we wanted it to go. Once again, I named 5 celebrities and asked Jacob to go next. He was confident enough to name Nicole this time without any prompting because of what had led him to believe the day before about Nicole feeling the same way about him and Travis not giving a damn. Unfortunately, neither of those things were true and as soon as he named Nicole, she pretended to be shocked and so did I. We threw him under the bus there, and when I took a look at Travis, he was already fuming. He's a pretty buff guy so it was definitely intimidating, but Jacob was unfazed and continued to smile at Nicole. Travis addressed it first and told him that he needed to apologize to everyone at the table and then we would end this double date, so Jacob had a chance to read the room and do the right thing, but as usual, he did the exact opposite of it and still chose to believe my lies despite the proof of it being untrue being right in front of his face in the form of an angry Travis and a shocked Nicole. Yet he chose to answer back saying that he wasn't going to apologize because he knew that the feelings were mutual. He even decided to take it a notch higher and said that now that everything was out in the open, he and Nicole didn't need to push down their feelings for each other anymore and pretend like there was no tension there because now, Travis and I couldn't do anything. Unfortunately, Travis most definitely could do a lot of things and out of anger, he immediately grabbed Jacob by the collar from across the table and pulled him up to a standing position. And before we even had time to react, there was a loud thump after which I only remember Jacob being knocked down and the restaurant authorities escorting all of us out. Nobody called the cops because the restaurant didn't want any bad press, which was lucky for us. There was a lot of blood afterwards and from what I know, Jacob had a broken nose but he still had the audacity to continue the brawl outside the restaurant. He tried to taunt Nicole and me by calling us cowards because by then, he'd put 2 and 2 together and realized that we'd come up with this plan only to humiliate him and only left when Travis warned him that one more word from him would land him in the hospital for a good few days. After that, I didn't go home and instead went to a hotel nearby. They dropped me off and while in the car, we explained everything to Travis. We thought he'd be a little miffed that we hadn't involved him in this plan of ours, but he told us that he was glad we hadn't informed him beforehand or else he might not have punched Jacob since he doesn't like getting into fights unless it's something serious. But he told us that Jacob deserved this and he wasn't sorry about it at all. He dropped me off and they went home after dinner since we hadn't been able to eat at the restaurant. After about 2 hours, just before I was about to crash, I received a text from Jacob saying that I was an awful person for doing what I did. He complained that he had to go to the ER all on his own since his nose was broken and he'd had to get it plastered. He said that my decision to screw with him just to get back at him for merely saying that he found Nicole attractive was disgusting and that he wanted a divorce as soon as possible. According to him, what I did was unacceptable and he thought that it was psychotic and juvenile of me to concoct a plan to get him beaten up by a guy twice as big as him. I felt a little bad that he had to deal with the ER on his own because I know blood and hospitals freak him out. I didn't respond to his text last night because I was too tired to even think about anything else, so I just went to sleep without much delay. I was still riding the high of watching Jacob get punched and didn't think that I'd done anything wrong. But now that I've woken up and I've also sobered up, I realize that what I did was definitely kind of messed up. He was right, it was juvenile of me and Nicole to sit and plot against him just to watch him make a total fool out of himself and then get punched right in the face. I think we went a little overboard and did something very high school-ish. I'm not happy about it anymore, but I'm also not sure if he was in the right here, either. I mean, He did say a lot of things that were just not cool. Not only did he admit that he finds Nicole hot right in front of her husband and his own wife, but he actively tried to get with her while we were around. I know he only said those things because I'd let him believe that Nicole liked him back, but even then, it was crazy because that meant that these had been his true feelings toward her all along. And I still can't forget the fact that he called me her less attractive sidekick. That's obviously got to sting coming from your own husband. I know the marriage is over, but I don't know if I owe him an apology for doing what I did. I do think what I did was petty and kind of overkill, but the things he said last evening kind of made it seem like he deserved it. So Ida for lying to my husband and letting him hit on my best friend just to get him beaten up by her husband? Update 1. Okay, I went through the comments on my original post and I'll admit it. I messed up big time. Most of you guys said that ESH and I know it's true. What my husband said was disgusting, but what Nicole and I did was super juvenile as well. We didn't even take Travis' feelings into consideration and kind of used him and his anger just to humiliate and hurt Jacob. We were actually counting on him losing his temper even though we knew that he had to work hard to bring it under control, and made a total mockery out of it, which was very, very insensitive of us. I guess I was just acting out of spite and didn't give anything much thought, and neither did Nicole. I'm embarrassed now that I'm thinking about what we did with a clear mind, and so is Nicole. So we really do think that we owe Jacob an apology because he did get physically hurt, and like many of you said, there might be a chance that he might press charges or something. It's been 3 days and it hasn't happened yet, but that doesn't mean it won't. So just to be on the safe side, Nicole and I are going to apologize to him, but I'm still leaving him. It's going to be hard, but I know I have to do this. It's the right thing to do. We're also going to apologize to Travis, obviously. Because we know that we took undue advantage of his weakness, and I think I painted a really bad image of him here, too. He's not a bad guy, honestly. He's just had a rough time with his anger, but he's still going to therapy to deal with it, and it's improved a lot since when he was a teen delinquent. He'd never hurt a fly unless it posed a threat to him, and tries to avoid getting violent as much as he can. He even gave Jacob a chance to apologize and only got mad when he didn't, and continued to creep his wife out, and to be fair, I think that anyone would have lost it by then. Also, the incident that Nicole was telling me about where he'd beaten up a guy for catcalling her was from several years ago, when they just started dating and he'd just given him a black eye. Like I said, he wouldn't hurt anyone who doesn't totally deserve it. I'm not trying to defend violence in general, but sometimes you have to do something about certain situations where words just don't seem to cut it. Update 2. Hi, everyone. So Nicole and I tried to apologize to Jacob today, but it was not well received. I went back home with her to collect my things and bring some fresh clothes with me to the hotel. He let me in, but he looked really unhappy about it and didn't say a word to either of us the entire time that we were there. His nose was still in bandages, and I did feel guilty about it because he was visibly in a lot of pain. We packed in silence, and I decided to apologize right before we were about to leave. I told him that I wanted to apologize for being so harsh and tricking him, and I thought he'd apologize to me and Nicole as well for saying all that crap that he did. But instead of that, he told me to leave and that he wasn't interested in our apologies now that the damage was already done. He told us to be grateful that he hadn't pressed charges against Travis, and said that both of us should count ourselves lucky that he'd even expressed any interest in either of us at all, because both of us were nothing compared to the women he'd been with before us. So that was a little weird, but we were too shocked to say anything, and he continued to rant about how he'd given us both a chance but we'd both blown it, so now our apologies meant nothing to him because no matter what we said, he wasn't going to take me back, and he definitely wasn't going out with Nicole anymore. I tried to tell him that we weren't here to ask for a second shot to be with him, and he was delusional for even thinking that that's what the apology was for, but he slammed the door shut right in our faces. I guess it was our fault for believing that he'd have turned into a decent human being all of a sudden. That clearly didn't happen, and I'm not surprised either. Even when we were in a relationship and throughout our marriage, he'd talk freely about his hot coworkers or cute women he'd meet, but I never thought much of it since it wasn't like he was acting on it. So no harm, no foul. I had the misconception that he told me all about his interactions with other women because that's how secure I was, but turns out, it had nothing to do with me and everything to do with his own ego and the fact that he thought he was God's gift to earth and wanted me to be grateful that he was married to me. In spite of the million other choices that he apparently thinks he has. But at least Nicole and I did our part and apologized for screwing up, but he's in over his head, so his rejecting our apology is not something we can help. Our conversation with Travis went a lot better, and in fact, he insisted that we didn't need to apologize at all because he would gladly whack any other disrespectful guy the same way because that's the only way they learn. He even said that if his parents couldn't teach him to respect his wife and other women, then he'd be more than happy to take that job up and teach him in his own way, which I thought was kinda cool of him. Nevertheless, we did apologize to him for taking advantage of him and inadvertently trying to rile him up just for our entertainment, and he accepted it. That was it. No further drama. So that was all, and now, I'm just looking for a lawyer to deal with the impending divorce. I don't know how I'm feeling about any of this, but I know I'll get through it as long as I have my friends and family with me. It's just gonna be a pain to meet him during the divorce proceedings, but I'll be fine, I guess. Update 3. Hi, so I filed for divorce a couple of days ago and Jacob was served yesterday. This morning, I received a text from him telling me that I was going to regret this, but since I'd already filed for divorce, he wasn't going to stop me. He told me to come back and collect everything else that belonged to me, like all the knickknacks, photo albums, and other miscellaneous things that I owned but didn't bring with me because I hadn't found an apartment yet and I was still living in the hotel. He told me to get it done by the end of this week or he'd either give it away to charity or just dump it in the trash, so I've had a word with Nicole and will be moving in with her temporarily, and she's been kind enough to let me keep all my belongings in her storeroom until I'm able to find accommodation for myself. I'm so grateful for her, I swear. I know Jacob has been talking crap about me to all our common friends, but he doesn't realize that he's the one who comes off as a total clown who hit on his wife's best friend and then got beaten up by her husband. Most people have reached out to me to tell me I'm doing the right thing and wished me luck because of his story, so he's doing me a favor without even knowing it. And his disrespect and pettiness don't even bother me anymore because I know he's just a total loser and I'm inherently better than him.